All right. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, I had to make a little bit of a change in my office because I just got tired of being stuck in the same corner of the office.
Okay.
And it happens to be perfect timing because I switched over to the Lewis Hamilton side of my office with his
Mm-hmm.
Black Panther salute there. And the newest Black Panther has been announced for the
I
next
saw
Black
that.
Panther 3. So, of all places, I saw the announcement on Sports Center. I'm like,
Hmm.
what?
Yeah,
But
that's
anyway,
random.
yeah, they were making the announcement of all the different Marvel movies and main characters. And so I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So it just happened to be that I moved to this side when that was happening. But how are things going for you out in Colorado?
Yeah, they're great. I mean, hot, but I feel like I saw this little meme on Instagram, and it was a runner who was like running in the cold with snow and ice on the ground, and the like thought bubble was, "Gosh, I can't wait for it to be the summer to be running." And then it switches to like this picture of like a camel in a desert and just like no water, and oh my God, it's awful. I feel a little bit like that.
Oh, we are never satisfied, never
I know,
satisfied.
I
So
know. Yeah.
I get it. I get it. Well, and then too, it's even if the temperature is right, is the humidity right? And then it's like always something. So yeah,
Yep.
I get
Yep.
that. I saw this guy, this was last week, running in the pouring rain, and I was like, I remember when I used to love those runs. Now,
Mm,
not so much, but I used to love those runs. I'm like, clearly I'm at a new place in my life. Clearly I
yep.
am.
Yep.
But anyway, all right, well, let's dive into the word of the week. All right, so Dr. Lisa, this word of the week directly connects with one of our phases this week, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. But folks
Hmm.
may have heard this phrase in passing, but I want to name it and give some definition and just a couple of examples here. Respectability politics. Politics. So even if you don't know the definition of the word, Lisa, the first thing I'm thinking about is exactly who is being respected or
Right.
disrespected, who determines what's respectable or not, and how does that play
Yep.
into personal relationships. I'm at least
Yep.
starting there, knowing
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
based off the words. So respectability politics is a strategy where people from marginalized groups conform to mainstream cultural standards of appearance and behavior. An example of that is dressing conservatively or adopting polite speech. And they do this in order to gain social acceptance, avoid discrimination, and combat negative stereotypes. Now, this term was coined by the historian Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham in her 1993 book, Righteous Discontent, describing how Black Baptist church women used moral reform and refined manners as a civil rights strategy. Now,
Interesting.
I thought that was interesting because I've never heard of this book, but I have heard of the author. And I think what's interesting about respectability politics, of course, they can be debated by people within those marginalized groups, outside of them, et cetera. But what I think is interesting is it does blame the victim in many ways, in that it implies that systemic oppression exists because of individual
Yeah.
behavior
Hmm.
or misalignment rather than the structural stuff. We talk about this all the time on this podcast, Lisa. Is it individual or is it systemic and structural?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Another thing, it can create internal division. We're going to talk about this piece in just a little bit. It forces marginalized groups to police their own members, creating a harmful split between a quote respectable upper middle class and a quote shameful lower class, which here we go again with another form of divide and conquer, right, Lisa?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and then it can mean loss of identity, meaning it demands the suppression of cultural authenticity and
Hmm.
personal expression in exchange for conditional acceptance. I would say, Lisa, for those that follow Ryan Clark, who is a former ESPN football analyst, sports analyst, so forth, is that he just talked about recently not just being downsized or laid off by ESPN, but being fired by ESPN, and recalling in no uncertain terms things that he did in order to remain in this respectable place to hopefully keep his $2 million a year job, and still lost the damn job. And so I continue to think about him as one example. We're going to get into others, but he gives a great example of how kind of bought into a certain way of dressing, speaking, talking, acting, being, with the hopes that I would continue to be, what he said, chosen. And at some point, he still, after 12 years, was unchosen. So, Lisa, thoughts on respectability politics now that we have some deeper roots to the language?
Yeah, I've definitely heard of it before, but not had this kind of in-depth definition. The conditional acceptance piece, I think, is a huge piece of that, right? There is a performance or a desired state of being that people emulate for this idea of acceptance, but really it is ultimately conditional, because if you fall out of that, then that acceptance goes away, right? So I really like that framing of it in terms of the loss of identity, but also this kind of striving for something that is never permanent. And I always think about it. I was thinking while you were talking, I was like, how do I understand this term? Like, how have I used this term before? And I was thinking, obviously, in the context of the politics and politicians, it's when politicians kind of feign civility and respectfulness as a way to play the game when they're actually pretty shitty humans and don't care one bit about being kind or having integrity. So that's the way I've thought about it before. So I really like this different way, fuller way of thinking about it as a way to further marginalize a group's cultural identity and trying to assimilate them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I hear that, and it kind of, I don't know if it's like the first, second, third cousin to civility language and that whole branch of language where it's like, well, who gets to determine what's civil?
Yeah.
How is civility or respectability being used to control people and whitewash people and scrub people of their uniqueness and identities and so forth? I feel like they're cousins in some way, and I'm still thinking it through. They're somewhat related, because I'm still asking the question of who gets to define respectable, who gets to define what the standard is. And until the standard is defined, you can't really determine how people are deviating from it. That's what I think is really curious about this. But anyway, respectability politics, you may or may not have heard of it, but I'm sure that we see it all around us in lots of different examples. I'm even thinking about Dr. King specifically, where people are saying, don't make such a hubbub about things. Why can't we talk about race and economics in a more civil way? Well, for some people, the civil way of dealing with those topics is to not talk about it at all.
Not talk about it.
I can't work with those. I can't work with that type of respectability politics, because nothing happens to improve my life and the life of others. So I'm just more examples are coming to mind. So, but yes, but here we go once again with another word that we can't unhear it. We're going to see it all around us. All right, let's get into phase one. All right, Dr. Lisa, this is one of those times where it's not coming from Instagram, y'all. I get my news from other sources. I promise you.
Yes.
Fun ones come from Instagram. But this one in particular comes from our roots, Dr. Lisa, from higher ed in specific. And so let's talk about Tuskegee University and their newly announced dress code policy. And it's not just dress, it's several other things, but let me just share with you what they've folded into this message that was addressed to parents of incoming students. So they updated the dress code policy and some of the behavioral standards for students starting at the beginning of this academic year. And there's a few things that are prohibited, including wearing bedroom shoes, bonnets, and do-rags in classrooms and cafeterias. They've also said that revealing clothing is banned in classrooms, dining areas, and other official university events such as convocation. Students attending professional events or business meetings must wear business suits and appropriate footwear under the updated guidelines. And so the president, Dr. Mark A. Brown, said the changes, quote, aim to give students a solid foundation for the workforce they will enter once they leave Tuskegee rather than limit their college experience. And he said, quote, the goal here is not meant to restrict students from enjoying the Tuskegee experience, but to prepare them with a solid foundation for the workforce that they will enter once they leave. Other things they folded into this, Lisa, are cell phones being turned off during class unless professors give specific permission to use them. They're going to be monitoring attendance more closely, viewing regular class participation as essential to academic success. And they're doing this right on the cusp of welcoming one of their largest incoming classes in 32 years. And so, for this, I thought it was very interesting that, Tuskegee is an HBCU. And for generations, they have emphasized professionalism, the workforce, preparing to make that leap from college to the workforce. But at the same time, I think it's very interesting that it's creating such a hubbub when we have a lot of fish to fry that may be bigger. And so I'm like, interesting. And you know me, Lisa, especially when we're talking about policy, I don't care what the doggone policy is. If you told everybody they have to wear purple every weekday, then how are you going to enforce it is my question.
Yeah.
So anyway, how does that policy land on you and everything that's kind of rolled into it?
Well, I was actually going to ask you, for our listeners that have never heard of the university, you mentioned it's an HBCU. Can you say a little bit more about it? Because it's a pretty storied institution, right?
Yes, absolutely. Look, Lisa, I think more people have heard of the Tuskegee experiment than they have the actual university.
Yeah.
But yes, folks, you should be aware of Tuskegee. It's located in Tuskegee, Alabama. It does have such a storied background. In particular, it was originally called, like many schools were called, normal schools, Tuskegee Normal School for quote unquote colored teachers originally. And then the name evolved into Tuskegee Institute and so forth. Private, historically Black land grant school, founded in 1881, I believe. And what I think is interesting is that, you have a lot of folks that were baked into the founding of this institution. I mean, the architect, Mr. Taylor, he was the first African-American to graduate from MIT that literally designed the campus. And the first, founder, president, Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, Tuskegee Airmen, quite literally, all of them. And then, of course, the syphilis study, which I think I've shared with folks that my grandfather very closely missed participating in that study that now becomes the foundation of more ethical practices in IRB and research and so forth. And so, with that, it's interesting because, of course, other HBCUs, other organizations are going to look around and see what their standard is and possibly do some comparisons and changes as a result of that. And so, a storied school of this level, of this magnitude, of this historical root has to be careful pronouncing anything when it comes to a policy and so forth, because other HBCUs are going to look around and take notes. So that's just a little bit, but I could go on, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, that's great. I think that historical context is really
Hmm.
important. So do
Yeah.
you know what precipitated this policy change? Like, has there been something that happened or a
I don't think
quote
it's
unquote
reactionary,
okay.
but I'm
No,
not
okay.
sure. I'm not sure though. But keep talking.
Well,
I'll
and
dig a
just,
little bit
like,
more.
is it like
Mhm.
faculty and staff are saying, gosh, the clothing and behavior of our students has just deteriorated over time. We need to set some different
Mm.
standards, like,
Hmm.
um, or, because it seems weird that this would just happen out of the blue.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and it's really, really interesting because what my ears perked up at was the quote unquote revealing clothing. And it goes back to your point earlier around respectable. How do
Hmm.
we define revealing? Or
Hmm.
who is defining revealing? And I think about all of the
Hmm.
ways that women's bodies in particular have been policed, right?
Hmm.
And then, there was I think, appropriate, yeah, business suits and appropriate footwear. And again, like, so how are we defining appropriate? And then part of me is like, well, yeah, sure, you shouldn't be wearing your slippers to a business meeting. But then I'm like, well, where am I, like, why? Like, where have I got that from? Is that just because I have been submerged in the culture and told that that is not okay? Um, yeah, so I have mixed feelings about it. Like, I'm wondering how it came to be. I think the words are troubling to me, the way things are being described, and there doesn't seem to be a larger critique of what it means to impose these standards at this institution with this large of a class of people, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and I think what's interesting and kind of the stir about this is, of course, when you think about any of those words in the policy itself, you're probably going to think of one gender versus another one, the one that we belong to, right, Lisa? So,
Mm-hmm.
when
Mm-hmm.
we think about revealing, it's pretty rare that I immediately think about a man and revealing clothes. I usually think of someone is judging a woman based off her clothes and what they see through the male gaze as being revealing or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously that's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece too, and this is a cultural piece of the overall puzzle. It's interesting that depending on the HBCU campus that you're on, and let me step back and preface to say, yes, I've been Black for 48 years, but I have never attended an HBCU as a student. I have gone to all PWI. So please know that this is second, third hand observation and sharing. Let me just say that. But from my understanding, depending on the type of campus, you can go either or. It could be PJ slippers and a bonnet on your head on the way to class, or the other extreme of this is, I want to dress up really nicely. I want to wear heels to
Mm-hmm.
class. I want to, you know, feel good about myself. And so I may wear what some people would consider their quote unquote Sunday best, which is also
Mm-hmm.
problematic in some ways. And so, given that, you can get either of those. So, if you walk into an HBCU classroom, you might find, regardless of gender, someone with their SpongeBob PJs, slippers, and a bonnet or a do rag on their head. And at the same time, someone that has on a plunging neckline or a open midriff, heels, what have you. Okay. Given that, this is what gets interesting to me
Mm-hmm.
is, on one hand, me, my children will not show up publicly outside of this household with a bonnet on or PJs on unless it is PJ day at school. That's
Mm-hmm.
my household standard. I'm not judging others who do. If they do, then that's what they do, and I will fight vehemently for their choice to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, what I think is really interesting, because I hear people saying this all the time, and I think it applies here. As much as it gets on my nerves, what the systemic challenges of all of this are, it's kind of like, you're free to do whatever, but you're not free from the consequences of that. You're free to show up in your SpongeBob PJs to the internship interview or the job interview, but you're not free from the
Right.
perception of those that are interviewing you and what that
Hmm.
means for your future. That doesn't mean I like the system that we're in, but that's the pragmatism of saying you realize this is the standard.
Right.
And I think that's what this president is trying to get at with the specific portion of the dress code piece is we're trying to prepare you for after college. And so why not start practicing in college
Yeah.
what the
Yeah.
system will be outside of college? I hear that part. I hear it.
Hmm.
Um, and at the same time, could we not have a more nuanced approach to things? Like,
Right.
okay, maybe class and CAF, but not university official events like convocation or graduation. Something around that piece, Lisa. I think it could be more nuanced if they chose for it to be. And it might be. I don't know. I'm still looking for the full policy because this policy was communicated to parents. I haven't seen the actual print policy of what it is, but this was a communication to parents. So I'm like, this is interesting. And I also think that it's interesting that it was communicated to parents and not in other ways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
anyway,
the cafeteria is interesting to me. Like, do they have residence halls? Do they require
yeah,
students to live on? Yeah, so I
it's
just
not
feel like,
required to live on, but they do have residence halls. Yeah.
yeah, so like you're rolling out of bed and you want to grab some breakfast. Why does it matter if you're in your pajamas or you're, I don't understand that, right? That seems way too far. And I don't know that you could argue that is about work preparation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the
Mm-hmm.
other thing, so the things I feel better about, the cell phones turned off during class. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a horrible thing.
They should be
Um,
used to that depending on what state they're coming from, because I
right.
know for Trey right now in high school, that's the case anyway.
Yeah. I mean, other than an emergency, but how often, I mean, the nature of an emergency is that it's rare, right? So,
That's right.
I think, and then the talking in class, that's an interesting one to me because I do understand that some people are just less able
Mm.
to speak in class, right? They're shy or they're introverted. Um, and but they're still engaged, right? They're still learning the material. And so I don't think active participation should only be judged based on whether or not you speak in class. Like
Oh, well, wait.
showing up to class matters.
Well, the policy doesn't specifically say talking.
Well, regular class participation is what I understood to mean. Like when we talk about participation grades, that's often a piece of that is
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
talking in some way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. I try not to focus primarily on talking because depending on the situation, what we know how this goes, whether it's in person, virtual, or hybrid, and what does class participation look like? Does that mean that you're rolling in there late and leaving early? Are you actually actively paying attention, or can I see you doing 17 other things and you're not neurodivergent where you need that? Um, there's other ways to gauge class participation, but at the same time, I still feel you in that if you have faculty who you and I know they are trained in their field, they are not trained in teaching, that assume that if a student isn't
Yeah.
talking, that they're not participating. I get your point. Yeah.
So, yeah, so I would hope that there would be more guidance. And maybe there is. Maybe this is just an
Mm-hmm.
overview that's sent to parents, right? And there is more specifics. And the last thing I'll say, I guess, is like you're back to your point at the beginning is how is this going to be enforced and how are you going to ensure that
Mm-hmm.
it's enforced fairly and consistently, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm-hmm.
gets to determine the revealing clothing or clothing that looks like you would wear it to bed, right? When actually you
That's
don't,
right.
or something. Like
Mm-hmm.
who's making that judgment? Is that down to the individual professor, the individual administrator? Like who is then applying the standard? What is the standard and how is that? That feels like a
Mm-hmm.
big old quagmire right there in
That's right.
terms of how you can consistently apply that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that I'm so torn on this one, because just because I personally and mine personally would not do
Hmm.
something, that doesn't mean that I would block someone else.
Right.
And at the same time, I think what's really interesting, and one of my sorority sisters posted this, and I have to agree with her on this, is that the respectability politics of it is, yes, that connection to workforce,
Hmm.
and those that are usually making decisions are men, white straight men, da 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 da.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, you're talking about a historically Black institution, Africans and our people that were literally kidnapped, as if we didn't have standards when we were on the continent in our own countries there. Yeah, we're being required, or at least we're trying to fit into a standard here, but it's not as if we were people without
Right.
standards at any point in time.
Hmm.
We did also have standards in our home countries as well. So yes, it's a different standard, but it's not just a no standard, do whatever the hell you want to do. So I'm also wrestling with that piece as well, because that's very true.
Yeah, and standards are not natural, right? They're not like this natural, earthly, planetary thing. They are created by humans. So how do we even so we have constructed standards and then choose to live by those standards, but only a small percentage of people have been in the process of constructing them, right? So even if it's,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, so I just even think that calls into question that piece of it as well for me.
Yeah, the question is, who created those standards and by
Right.
what measures? And
Yeah.
do we trust their judgment on making those standards? And do we
Yeah.
understand the rationale of those standards? So, that to me, I think is it, because the first thing I think about when a school, any school, I've even seen some, uh, uh, whether it's a cruise ship or what have you, that bans bonnets, for example. My, all over the place brain thinks, well, let's track this all the way back. There's a particular, for all genders, there's a particular standard of appearance and beauty. For
Hmm.
Black people, usually it's been to fit into some type of European standard of that. The whole point
Hmm.
of wearing the freaking bonnet is to fit into that standard. And even as we're trying to fit into a standard, we're being vilified for trying to fit into yet another standard. I mean, it feels like those, what are those things called, Lisa? Where are they, the Russian dolls, where it's the little one and they go all the way down from the little one to the big one, and they're inside one another. It's like it's a standard inside a standard inside a standard inside a standard, over and over and over again. That's what it feels like to me when I hear about it in any setting. And even before I heard about this particular Tuskegee policy, I'm thinking to myself, every time I've seen it, it's like we're policing the policing of the policing when it comes to fitting into someone's standard, and nobody knows. Well, some of us know who created it, but very few of us had a hand in creating said standard.
Yeah, and I just think what you just described was like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't kind of thing, right? So the
Absolutely.
purpose of the system is to create opportunities for failure, right? Because that's how the system is designed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
You can't wear your natural hair the way it naturally grows
Hmm.
out of your hair, out of your head, Black people. So, you know, we want you to fit into this standard, but in order to fit into this standard, you have to do all of this contortion of yourself,
Hmm.
including bonnets, wraps, so forth, for your hair and other attire that you're still not going to fit into. Good
Yeah.
luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't win. You don't win.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I personally don't care what a student wears into my classroom as long as they're learning. I don't give a crap. But I know that's not everything for everybody.
Yeah.
Some people want you
Yeah.
to come in with the ball gown and a three-piece suit, and they think that you're going to learn something as a result of that. And that's just my
Yeah.
personal opinion. And at the same time, like to your point, I was envisioning that student that has the bonnet on, that has their, SpongeBob PJs on, walking across to the calf to get something to eat, and they literally walk past, the employer that they want an internship with. What do you do? It's a possibility. It happens all
Yeah,
the time
it
on
is. It
HBCU
is. Yeah.
campuses. So
Yeah.
anyway, it does feel like a Russian doll type situation that we got a whole lot of stuff to. I hate using the phrase unpack, but that's the best one I have for it right now. There's things
Hmm.
within things that we got to
Yeah.
figure
Yeah.
out. So, all right, take us into phase two.
Okay, so since we are our recording date and air date are pretty close together, I decided what I wanted to do was throw you some things that happened last week and get your hot takes on them. So I have two or three items that I want to hear Shauna's perspective on, and maybe they'll, cascade into a longer conversation, but I'm hoping to get to all of them. So all right. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, because we talked about this recently on the pod, is about the Smithsonian. So the latest thing that happened with the Smithsonian, I think this was Friday of last week. The president has decreed that there need to be notices put outside the Smithsonian museums saying that some of the exhibits are inaccurate. And that he can do that because he controls the National Park Service, right? So he can require the NPS to do that versus putting up signs inside the museum. So, what do you think about that?
Yet we still have no proof that his name has been taken off the side of the freaking
Yeah,
Kennedy Center.
right.
Yet again, another diversion and waste of money. Another divert. The overwhelming, maleficent narcissism that it takes to tell people who have spent their entire lives studying particular topics that they are inaccurate is mind blowing. That's all I'm going to say. Mind blowing. And I will say, I did notice, I did not read them, but I did notice that it was another historian association that spoke similarly to what we covered in a previous episode
Hmm. Hmm.
around the inaccuracies and the narrow and false interpretation that he wants to place upon the Smithsonian. So now we have more than one professional organization speaking against him. So I want them to keep talking and keep kicking up dirt about this whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just insanity, right? Like, no, the history that is represented in these museums is not inaccurate. You just don't like it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, anyway. Okay, so
And again, all the people for decades that have allowed him to think that what he doesn't like is inaccurate, false, and not
right.
okay. The
Yeah.
fact that people have made him so comfortable for decades to think that only what he likes can be true,
Hmm.
to me, I'm holding all of those folks accountable. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He's unconscionable, but everyone who's allowed it, someone has to allow the monster to continue to fester and foster their thought. Who are all those
Hmm.
folks? Everybody that's been around him since day one. But that's just
Yeah.
me.
The enablers. Yeah. All
Enablers.
right.
There you go.
So this also involves the same person. But so the White House Correspondents Dinner, you may remember there was a shooter at the original one, I forget now, a couple of
Yes.
months ago. And so it was rescheduled, and that happened on Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
And the president was there, and he gave a rambling speech that was
Mm-hmm.
about 1 hour long. Um, and among other things, what I want to hear your thoughts on is so Kaitlin Collins is a CNN news anchor, and she often is at the White House and asks questions, and he often insults her when she asks those questions. And I believe she won an award. And so the president said this: I want to personally congratulate CNN's Kaitlin Collins on receiving her award. It was all about me. It's a fake. She shouldn't get the award. It was a fake. But I didn't mind. I said, Kaitlin, congratulations. But it was fake. There's no question about it. He then goes on to say, she's a young, attractive woman. She never smiles. I said, Kaitlin, do you ever smile? Smile. You have a nice position. You're at CNN fake news. You should be a happy person. So smile, Kaitlin. Just smile. So
Mm-hmm.
There was more, but they're the two excerpts that I wanted to say. So,
Yeah.
wondering what is your reaction to that? Because
Oh, yeah.
I had a reaction.
Oh, I always have a reaction when any man tells a woman that they need to smile more, unless you're working for a toothpaste brand. I
Right.
never want to hear someone policing a woman's body
Yeah.
again. And so, yeah, policing a woman's body, um, and it's constantly how little can I attempt to make someone feel in order to feel bigger. I mean, it is the biggest form of bullying that we see outright. And let me go back to your point, though. Yes, I know that that speech was an hour long. I would never listen to it. Let me just be clear on that. I'll read the transcript, but I physically cannot listen to this man's voice. And here we go again with the enablers. I guarantee you that any agenda for any prior president at this event was not just given 1 hour to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
Cut the freaking mic off. There's no
Right.
one that is willing to interrupt his comfort. Nobody. If you let him talk there for 3 hours, he would have done it.
He would have.
No
Yeah.
one wants to hold him accountable because they fear what can happen because they will be next in line.
Mm-hmm.
That's another problem with this. But yeah, once again, policing women's bodies. I have the right to tell a woman what to do with her body, and I'm not even
Yeah.
getting into a position with CNN. That's a whole nother conversation too. But I have the right to tell a woman what to do with her body.
Yeah, so it also sounds like many of his jokes fell flat, and by the end of the speech, like he wasn't getting much of a reaction from anyone, and so he had to explain his jokes a couple of times because he didn't understand why people were laughing because he's so regularly around sycophants who just laugh at his whatever, right? And this
Oh, and
audience was not. Yeah,
the narcissism of thinking that we're too dumb to understand his jokes, which is why we're not laughing. No, it's just not fucking funny. How about that? It's not funny.
yeah, yeah. The sexism,
Enablers.
homophobia. Yeah, yeah. It's pretty interesting why he was even there, honestly, because he has
Mm,
cracked down on free speech and
mm-hmm.
journalism in a way that no other president has, and yet he considers himself this champion of free speech, and that's what the whole Correspondents' Dinner is about, celebrating freedom of the press and free speech, and yet he is actively, chopping that down. So, well, I also did not listen to the whole thing either because it would have driven me crazy. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so another thing that came out last week,
I'm
our
scared. I'm
boy,
scared.
uh, our boy Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War,
Right, right.
um, he has decreed, I'm not sure how, like whether it's an internal military memo or how it comes to be, but he now wants all men over 30 to be tested for testosterone levels. And if their testosterone levels are low, they are going to be offered hormones, so testosterone, to improve them. Because to be a warfighter and to be prepared, apparently you need to have high levels of testosterone. But what I'm thinking, Shauna, is that sounds a whole lot like gender affirming care that has been banned for trans people in the military.
Exactly. Exactly. Gender affirming care is okay as long as it's his gender.
Mm-hmm.
This man is sick. He's sick. He's sick. And here's what's interesting about testosterone. Oh, this can also, since we just talked about it a little bit, this also can turn very Tuskegee-ish as well.
Mm.
Because then if you are offering testosterone to anyone, um, yes, it is gender affirming care, but what happens when there is or can be overdoses of such usage and
Yeah.
they're testing it for whatever reasons? I mean, they're already military that are concerned and nervous, but yet they know they have no choice when it comes to something as basic as a flu shot. When it
Mm-hmm.
comes to ingesting anything at all, and what are the long-term effects of that. And so with that, I'm like, that sounds really suspicious to me.
Mm-hmm.
And if we think about it, think about, okay, he wants to be this hyper masculine, so we know some of this, the intended and unintended side effects of testosterone is, your muscle and bone situation,
Mm-hmm.
sperm production, sex drive. Hello, do you really want sex drive when people are in the middle of a freaking war and on submarines? And anyway,
Right.
he hasn't thought that far. Cognition can be impaired as well.
Mm.
A number hair growth, which we talked about before in another podcast, of how he's
Yep.
trying to manage and police hair growth. Well, you're creating more of a problem, especially for men of color.
Right. For
My God.
those not watching this, Shauna just put her head in her hands.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And and all of this, it starts to segment even more identity groups beyond within gender, when it comes down, okay, age. Like, are you forcing every male to take it or not? Because based on age, that's going to determine
Right.
how effective it's going to be. Genetics themselves, lifestyle, because yeah, you got to pass your PT test and a few other things, but you only have to do that, what, maybe once a year?
Mm-hmm.
So in between, what does that mean? Folks who are already diabetic, or those types of conditions that they already have, maybe that they acquired while in the military. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. I'll stop right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. They're not gonna mandate the taking of testosterone, but I think you're right about the culture and what that pressure is gonna feel like if you have lower testosterone and that is, being kind of, tagged as less manly. And I could see people feeling coerced or pressured into taking it. And you're right to bring up all those
Mm-hmm.
health issues. Oh dear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So next one. So Todd Blanche is the acting district attorney. He took over from Pam Bondi, and
Mm-hmm.
he was nominated for the permanent position. And his hearings were last week or the week before, and he had a big old slip up. So
Uh-oh.
I'm forgetting the name of the senator who, to me, just seems like a complete, I don't know, pillow. Like I don't think there's a whole lot there. But he asked, he said, are you and President Trump friends? And Todd Blanche said, I am his lawyer. Pause. Was his lawyer. Yes. So, that's been like making the rounds, big old slip up for this idea about how partisan or how loyal would this Todd Blanche be to the president when he's supposed to be separated from. So, what do you think about that little slip?
Oh my God. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. He already said it. He said it. He said it. He couldn't help but say it. He's in the president's back pocket,
Mm-hmm.
which means that he's probably privy and has been privy for a long time to information that he probably couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't be. And it's kind of, what is it? It's the vicious cycle of,
Mm-hmm.
you are nominated because he trusts you, because you know that information, and because you know that information, you're going to continue to be in his back pocket. Right?
Right.
It's almost like a freaking gang that you got jumped into that you need to get jumped out of. Like, you can never get out of it. You're in there
Right.
now. You're in it. You're in it. So
Yeah,
yeah, he meant what he said, and then he tried to backtrack it as if we didn't hear it, and that's just a bell you can't unring. You can't
exactly.
unring it. And so, oh Lord. But yet then we'll try to say that he's not a yes man. Excuse me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean he's responsible for prosecuting James Comey for taking a picture of seashells on the beach and
Mm-hmm.
posting it, right? Which a side note I read today that they've pushed to get that case dismissed, which seems likely because it's absolutely ridiculous.
Mm,
Um,
mm, 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 mm,
but
mm,
I
mm,
think,
mm.
for people who don't know, like post Watergate, so post the 70s, all of these parameters and kind of
Yeah.
barriers were put in to keep the Justice Department and the Attorney General from being in the pocket of the president, right? So that it wasn't, justice could not be politically influenced. And that has
Mhm.
just crumbled in this particular administration. And so that slip from Todd Blanche, I think, kind of just encompasses the degree to which that bright line is no longer there.
And but things are so in the gutter right now anyway, Lisa. Even if he said he'd never met the man, just by virtue of his nomination, it's already suspicion with anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, Mary Had a Little Lamb could literally be nominated by the president, and people would think that something's wrong with her. Simply through the nomination process alone, because of the deep, deep, deep corruption.
Yeah, and talk about going back to your point around enablers and the people around
Mm-hmm.
him, this
Mm-hmm.
guy, Todd Blanche, is probably going to get confirmed. There's probably not going to be enough senators that will vote against him, despite the clear and present danger and evidence that this man is doing the bidding of the president, which
That's right.
is
That's right.
improper, you know?
Well, and it's always the backlash, right? It's always the we have to move in ways, or they do. They have to move in ways that avoid any backlash from the president, or at least minimize any backlash from the
Hmm.
president. Is anyone courageous enough to say no? That's
Hmm.
always the question. The enablers continue to do what they do, so he continues to get away with what he gets away with. So, are you friends? I am his lawyer. He said what he said to begin with. He can't.
Yeah.
He can try to retract it all he wants to, but everyone heard it. Folks heard it.
Yeah, and it's probably going to make no difference. That's what makes me the most frustrated and
There you
sad. But
go. That's it.
my little pilot light of hope is still out there that maybe at least a handful of senators. It doesn't take many. Won't take many Republican
Exactly. It
senators
shouldn't
to
take
say
many.
no, but
Mm-hmm.
these are the same people that voted yes for RFK and for Pete Hegseth. So
Exactly.
I have
There
to
you go.
catch myself. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, our as people say, our bar is in hell at this point when it comes to any type of ethical decision making coming from
Yes.
that group. Um, and at the same time, it's so much going on. It's like, can people really pay attention?
Hmm. Well,
I
that's
hope they
exactly
are.
it, right? I
I
don't
hope
think
they
so. I
are.
think there's just too much.
The
So
overwhelm is real. Yes.
I will leave it at that because that was kind of a doozy of a set of things that happened in just the last 8 or 9 days, and
Uh,
there's more stuff that I have missed, I'm sure.
oh,
So
for
yeah.
sure. For sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, oh, all right. Well, let's wrap up this episode of the Unfazed Unedited podcast. Y'all know how to reach us on all of your social media and favorite podcast apps at Unfazed Unedited with brackets around the first un. You can certainly email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com, or just go to our website, unfazedpodcast.com, where you can access the new or the old shows. And if you like this week's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, share with friends, coworkers, or others in this phase of your life. So until next week.
All right. See you next week.